read through your presentation. Right. I'm glad I was here. I wish I could be in here. Unfortunately. So, it's gonna be great. Yeah. It's great. I just wanted to the chair. So I said, say, hold on, we're going to the secretary's back here. Oh, you're talking about give me yes, exactly. So they don't have the message. I did. Vice Chair of Appropriations. Okay.
All right. You all ready? No, just want to make sure. All right. we are going to call the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee meeting to order. Thank you all for being here today for our first Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee hearing. And so happy to have you all here. Happy to also have our Vice Chair from Appropriations, Delegate Chang, here with us. I am, for the record, Delegate Tony Bridges, Chair of the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee, along with my Vice Chair, Delegate Julian Ivey, and our newest members, Delegate McComas and Delegate Stonko. Thank you so much for your service and for being a part of this commission. Our other commission member is going to be a little, committee. Our other committee member is going to be a little late. He's also doing a hearing right now on one of his bills. And so when he gets here, he'll just sit in and follow along with the presentation. And so today, for our members, we're going to have a presentation on the Department of Juvenile Services and really give a high-level overview of the way the department works. And so after the presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions as well. Feel free to just let me know when you want to ask a question. I'll call on you, and we'll take it from there. Following that, we will just convene and get ready to meet with our secretary. And so the secretary, unfortunately, couldn't be here today. And once we do have the secretary on board, of course, for his budget hearings, the secretary will be here. And so before we get to the secretary, we now have Kara Anderson, who is a director of legislation, policy, and reform. And Kara actually has given us a PowerPoint presentation that you should all have access to. And so we'll follow along in the presentation. And so with that, Kara?
All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Subcommittee Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, for having me today. Again, for the record, my name is Kara Anderson. I'm the Director of Legislation, Policy, and Reform at the Department of Juvenile Services. Happy to be your first guest here for the subcommittee. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about the Department of Juvenile Services. I'm going to try and guide you guys through since which slide that we're on. So we're going to start with our first slide and talk about the Department of Juvenile Services regions. So the Department of Juvenile Services is broken up into 8 regions that align with Maryland's judicial circuits. Our local offices manage our intake operations, all our alternatives to detention, community supervision, which is probation, reentry supervision, and the continuum of services that are community-based. On the next slide, you'll see the department's detention and commitment facilities that we operate. So the department runs 6 detention centers that are regional across the state. Detention facilities provide temporary care to young people who are pending disposition or other hearings that require secure custody to either protect the community or to ensure that a youth appears in court. So the detention facilities are regionally based. So we have the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center, which is located in Baltimore City. We have the Charles Hickey School that's located in Baltimore County. We have Cheltenham that's located in Prince George's County. We have the Noyes Children's Center located in Montgomery County. The Noyes Children's Center currently does not have any young people in it. The staff from that facility are supporting other of our detention facilities across the state. We have the Lower Eastern Shore Children's Center that's located in Wacomico County, and then the Western Maryland Children's Center, which is located in Washington County. Additionally, the department operates 4 committed facilities. The committed facilities serve young people that are court-ordered to receive treatment interventions in an out-of-home setting. So we have 2 youth centers, Green Ridge, which is located in Allegheny County, Backbone, that's located in Garrett County, the Garrett County Children's Center, which also currently does not have any young people in that facility. And then we have Victor Cullen, which is our hardware secure facility that's located in Frederick County. So now we're going to do a walkthrough of Maryland's juvenile justice system, which is on your next slide. So we're going to kind of walk through a case process. So a complaint is filed with the Department of Juvenile Services. A complaint can either come through a police arrest or a complaint can be filed by a member of the community. If it's an arrest, the police may request that a young person is detained. Once they make that request, the department uses its validated risk assessment tool to obtain a risk score to assist in its decision whether or not to detain a young person, provide that person an alternative to detention, such as electronic monitoring or a day and evening reporting center, or the youth can be released to the community pending their next court date. If the youth remains detained, then the judge reviews the case the next court date, and the judge can either continue the detention decision, they can release that young person on an alternative to detention, or they can release them. Then the youth has an adjudication hearing, and that's basically a trial in the adult court. So it's the determination of facts. Then the young person has a disposition hearing. At a disposition hearing, the department makes a recommendation as to the level of care the young person should receive, and then the judge makes the ultimate decision. Youth can be placed on probation and receive treatment in the community, or they can be ordered to an out-of-home placement. There are a number of levels of care that the department operates. So there are group homes. Those are programs that are located in the community, and then young people will go to the public high school in that community. Then there are staff secure facilities, and what makes those different is that kids actually go to school on grounds on those facilities. So the department operates those two programs, youth centers, at the youth centers, those camps that we talked about earlier. Additionally, there are other programs that we contract with that are that level of care. Then there's residential treatment centers. There's 5 of those located across the state. Hardware secure facilities, that's the one that the department operates, Victor Cullen Center. And then the department has a continuum of care located out of state. So we have staff secure, residential programs, and hardware secure programs out of state. So that's a little bit about the case flow. So now we're going to move in to the juvenile justice reform legislation that passed last session. So just a little bit of history on that, really brief. In 2019, the Maryland Juvenile Justice Reform Council was created. It was made up of a diverse group of stakeholders, a lot of state agencies, Department of Juvenile Services, Human Services, Health Department, Public Safety and Correctional Services, our judicial stakeholders, the court, state's attorney, public defenders, young people's advocates. The committee had provided technical assistance by the Vera Institute, came up with the recommendations that were eventually passed in 2022 and went into effect on June 1st. And so we've been busy over the interim working on educating and implementing those guidelines. We had over 50 trainings for DJS staff and our court partners and other key important stakeholders. So let's get into some of the changes. So the first change was expanding the access to diversion. So the legislation allows DJS intake authority to place nonviolent felony matters on pre-court supervision. Since the law has gone into effect, the department has seen an increase in the use of pre-court supervision. So that's the first chart. You can see that in June we were at 9%, and in October we were up to 16% on the use of pre-court supervision for young people. The next change is the minimum age. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Before you move on, can you explain what pre-court supervision is
Sure.
for folks that may not
Yeah,
understand?
pre-court supervision is an opportunity to provide youth services before going through the formal court process. So we would identify a young person, we'd identify their risks and needs, and then match them with treatment services in order for them to get services. If the young person is successful, we can resolve their case. If they're not successful, we can still forward that case to court. But it just gives us an opportunity to intervene early with that young person and provide them services immediately, because we know that when we treat young people quickly, we get better outcomes. Thank you. Of course. Oh, sorry.
I just have a quick question. Now, do you use I'll just use this as an example. For domestic violence, they have the lethality index that Jacqueline, forget her last name, it developed from Hopkins. What is your inventory for that, to your assessment as to whether this child would fit in?
Right, we have an intake decision tool that's a validated tool by the University of Maryland that we've worked with.
Is it possible you could provide it?
Oh, absolutely. It's in our data resource guide, which isn't done yet. It is online, but I'm happy to drop off.
No, if it's online,
Yeah, but I can send you the link so that you can have easy access to it.
all right, thank you.
Yeah, so it is a validated tool that we use to help make a decision of what services are what the risk needs of the young person are and what services would be the best intervention.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, no problem. All right, so I think we're on minimum age of jurisdiction. And so there were changes to the minimum age of jurisdiction. So the legislation changed the minimum age of jurisdiction of juvenile court jurisdiction to 13 unless the young person is between 10 and 12 and charged with a crime of violence. So since the law has been in effect, the Department of Juvenile Services has seen a decrease in the rate of youth under 13 that are charged with a crime of violence, and an increase use of the SINs, or child in need of supervision. So we've seen more SINs complaints since the new law went into effect. The next portion that we're going to talk about is detention utilization. So the legislation prohibits detention for a youth charged with a misdemeanor offense unless it's a handgun violation, or the youth has 2 prior adjudications in the previous 12 months. So when you look at the charts, I know you guys don't have color slides, but when you look at the charts, we've seen some changes to the detention population when you compare FY22 to the first 6 months of FY23. The next change we're going to talk about is commitment. So the legislation prohibits the use of commitment for a misdemeanor offense unless it's a handgun violation. It also limits the use of an out-of-home placement if a young person is charged with a technical violation of probation. And as you can see, there's been a really big shift in the committed population. So in FY22, you can see the majority of kids that were in committed court orders are misdemeanor offenses. And when you look at the first 6 months of this fiscal year, you can see the majority of those cases are crimes of violence. So we have seen a major shift in that part of the change. All right, so next we're going to move on to some 10-year trend data and talk about complaints. Those are what we talked about first, right, when the young person enters our system. And so when we look at complaints over the past 10 years, we've seen intake complaints decline 60%, and those declines have happened in all categories of crime. So in crimes of violence, misdemeanors, and felonies. We're going to move to the next slide and talk about detention. So we've seen the average daily detention population decline 53%. So if you look, there's the first column, the green column, those are the young people that are waiting pre-disposition. So those are the kids that are waiting for their adjudicatory hearing. The next is the yellow line, those young people that are waiting pending a placement. So those kids have gone through, had a disposition, are ordered to an out-of-home placement, and are waiting to be placed in that program. And then the last line, which is purple on your slides, is the number of youth that are in a detention center that are automatically charged as adults. And so that has been one of the shifts in the department's population. You can see in 2020, that's when the number of youth who are automatically charged as adults, overtook the number of youth that are in the detention centers pre-disposition. So I wanted to point that out for you. Next, when we look at the disposition, the 10-year trend in disposition, committed placements have declined 85%. So committed placements are the first column on your chart, the green column. We've seen commitment places decline 85%, and then when we look at the average probation caseload, we've seen those decline 77%. And that's the purple column, the second column on your PowerPoint. Finally, we're going to talk about recidivism rate, and we look at the reconviction rate of young people in our system. We've seen declines continue for both young people that have a disposition of probation and for young people who have a disposition of commitment. And so the top line on your chart are young people that come into the system, juveniles charges with their original court jurisdiction being juvenile. And then the green number are those young people that are charged as adults, have their cases transferred back, and then get a sentence in the juvenile court. So those are the two probation numbers on our recidivism. All right, and finally, the last page just has some resources for you. The Department of Juvenile Services Data Resource Guide is now up on our website, and that is, I have a printed copy because we don't have all of our printed copies yet, but this has the most information you could ever want about the Department of Juvenile Services, cut it every which way. We have a list of all of our contracted programs available online and some information about the SINs process and how that works. But now I would be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. Before I get into questions, I realize that it's only been 6 months since the implementation.
Yeah.
But the trends seem to show that things are already working or off to a good start at least. And so just wanted to give you kudos on that because I know a lot of work has gone into this. And so, hopefully those trends will continue and going in the right direction.
Thank you.
And I'd like to open it up to Delegate Ivey. Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay. the young guys messing up with the tech. So I just wanted to go to the slide where you talked about recidivism and the pretty steep decline in rate there. Wanted to ask if there were policies that were implemented or what was done to get us going in this trajectory, just so, I know for myself, but so we can build on that.
That's a great question. We have been really working on making sure that we're matching kids to the services that they need, looking at their risk scores and identifying, what young people need. We have been working with ROCA and training our staff in Rewire and really working with our case management staff to better be able to work with your young people to be able to assist them with their needs. And so I think that's something that has been really helpful. And really, matching kids to the programs that work and being able to intervene early, right, and getting them services started right away.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, I know that you'll be back with the secretary maybe in a week or so. But if you could really build out that piece of the discussion,
absolutely.
I think it would really be worthwhile. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Vice Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Ms. Anderson, for being here and providing this presentation. Specifically, wanted to ask you if you clarify or provide additional information on a detention utilization regarding the legislation prohibits detaining youth charged with a misdemeanor except if the youth is charged with a misdemeanor handgun violation. So if you could clarify that and provide additional information if you're able to. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understood your question.
Could you provide a little more clarity on with the exception for the misdemeanor with the handgun violation?
So a handgun violation is a misdemeanor offense. So if they're charged with a handgun violation, which is a misdemeanor, they're allowed to be detained.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any other questions? Delegate McCombs.
Sure. Just a quick question. If it's a misdemeanor, let's say it's an assault, and it's a misdemeanor assault, or it's a misdemeanor animal abuse, would they be, because they're misdemeanors, but potentially there could be pretty serious consequences, are they detained or not detained? Because they're not handgun offenses.
Under the new legislation, misdemeanor offenses are not allowed to be detained. So if it's one of those charges, if it's a misdemeanor offense, then detention is prohibited.
So my question too is, a lot of times if there's animal abuse, that's kind of precursor that there's going to be further problems later on in a person's adult life, and juvenile, that it'll escalate. And anecdotally, we hear, the press reports a lot about, animals are set on fire and all kinds of good stuff. And I was kind of curious, how did you, if you got the kid, how would you handle that?
I think that's a really good question. I think that we need to, detention isn't treatment for young people. So just because they're not detained doesn't mean that we're not doing assessments. We're using the tools that we talked about. We're using our risk, our assessments. And then when we get, the kid gets to court and they're adjudicated of that offense, then we're able to provide them the services and treatment that they need. And so I think that is how we're handling those cases, right? We're identifying what the needs are and matching those kids to the services that will help them be successful. And I think when you look at the recidivism data that we've been able to provide, we're seeing that we've been successful at being able to do that.
Just to follow up, another question is when a child gets in trouble and juvenile services makes the decision of what's going to happen, do they carefully interview the family and kind of get good information about how the family is, socioeconomic, and kind of maybe what the touch points are, and if maybe the parents need counseling or need parenting skills?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. The department absolutely meets with the young person and their family at the point of an intake conference. So yes, the family's involved. We identify what their needs are. We talked about that intake decision tool. We go through all of those things with the young person and their family. We identify what needs they have to be able to connect the young person and that family to services, right? Sometimes the parent needs additional support. We can connect them with other services in the community that can help the parent with some parenting skills, whatever else the family would need. So yeah, those are definitely things that we look at the point of intake.
Could I ask another question? I've been on the House Judiciary Committee maybe too long, and they threw me off. Anyway, my question to you is, you know, there are some fourth-degree sex offenses, okay? Would those be handled a little bit differently because they are misdemeanors than, let's say, you know, if it was just a simple theft?
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at them, we use our tool, we identify what services that would be needed, and we could make recommendations of referrals for young people to get services if it turns out that that's a level of care that they need. If that's something that we've identified, we can connect them with therapists right away, right at that intake process. Or we could look at the case and say, you know what, this needs to go to court, we need to have an adjudication, and at the time of disposition, then we could offer them the services that the department contracts for sex offender programs and all types of things.
And is the school notified that this child has, you know, when they go back in the school system and they're still under the Department of Juvenile Services, that this child's receiving help, or that it might, you know, someone in the school system knows? Because I think there were some situations where people were abused in bathrooms, and I forget the details. And I just kind of, I think there was a concern by the public that at least the school is aware of some of the child's issues, and I know there's privacy concerns, but
Right.
at least that the social workers or the school psychologists are aware of it, and you know, make sure that the other children are safe, as well as the person that's committed the misdemeanor.
Right, there's legislation, the reportable offenses legislation, that requires certain offenses to be reported to the school through the state's attorney's office, not through the department. But, you know, we do work with the family holistically, and I think it is important that when we're working with these young people that we're really protective of their confidentiality and making sure that we're able to hold that balance, right, be able to make sure that they get the support they need while maintaining, you know, their ability to be successful in the community.
But also protecting the public.
Yes, absolutely.
Or
Public
the
safety
children
is
in that
absolutely.
school.
Public safety is, you know, one of the tenets of the department's operation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Any other questions? I just want to go back to one thing, though. I know, and this may be more for the judiciary, but there was a sort of a lag time during COVID between, you know, the time that a person was detained and the disposition or the trial. Just curious, do you know if there's how long of a time that is between those two?
So there's statutory requirements in the juvenile system of how quickly we have to have those done. So there was no lag time during COVID. We worked really, really diligently because we knew like having kids in detention wasn't the best place for them. So we worked really hard to make sure that our reports are done so that we could, you know, be up to speed when the court was happening so that we could have a recommendation to the court. So we worked very quickly to make sure that that happened so kids weren't waiting in detention unnecessarily.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Ms. Anderson, for your presentation. Very thorough. We look forward to meeting with the Secretary soon and bringing him in for a hearing as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, members. And that will end today's public hearing.